Well, it's happening. Rod Rosenstein, the Deputy Attorney General, is departing, and I hope that people are ready to hit the streets in protest, and I'll talk about that in a moment. Here is what transpired over the last 3 days. A blockbuster New York Times article claimed that Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein discussed the potential to remove Donald Trump from office by using the 25th Amendment, which is meant to enable the removal of presidents who are unfit to serve, and also possibly mentioned the idea of secretly recording Donald Trump. This is a hugely important story, but it seemed from the first moment that it went out that it was possibly a deliberately leaked story in order to justify firing or forcing Rod Rosenstein to resign. And that indeed is what appears to have happened. The New York Times put this piece out. They said, listen, last year in 2017, Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein suggested that maybe secret recordings should be made of Donald Trump, suggested the possibility of trying to convince cabinet members of Trump's to invoke the 25th Amendment to trigger his removal from office on the basis of being unfit to serve. This supposedly all happened during that insane period when we learned that Donald Trump had fired FBI Director James Comey, had pledged in order to impede the investigation, had told James Comey that he wanted him to pledge loyalty to Trump, gave away classified information to a Russian spy recruiter in the Oval Office. It was that crazy time when all of that news was breaking. Rosenstein at the time had been deputy AG for 2 weeks. He was overseeing the Russia probe because Jeff Sessions was recused. And he felt that the memo he wrote justifying legally the firing of James Comey was completely misused by Donald Trump in justifying the sort of underlying political reasoning for the firing. The New York Times appears to have multiple sources on the story, and then we get into the thick of it, which is that Rosenstein, when the story went live, when the story was published by the New York Times, Rosenstein denied the account, and then it very quickly started to become evident that this could be a story, number one, used to justify the firing of Rod Rosenstein, and number two, may have been leaked by the Trump administration itself, because, of course, I don't deny for a second that the New York Times had the sources they claim to have, but, of course, we don't know exactly who those sources are. The Justice Department did acknowledge that Rosenstein mentioned the possibility of secretly recording Trump, but they said that it wasn't a serious suggestion. So first and foremost, we now have learned that indeed Rosenstein is going. This all broke in the last 30 to 45 minutes or so before we tape the show. We don't yet know whether Rosenstein is choosing to resign because he feels that the story has made him a big distraction. We don't know if Rosenstein was forced to resign. And we don't know if this is straight up one of those firings, which is dressed up as a resignation, which is basically, hey, Rod, we're firing you. We need you to submit your resignation at this time. But we have to be really careful about the story, because the discussion around the story has been basically a false dichotomy. One possibility is the story is real, period. The other possibility is the story is fake and planted by Trumpists wanting to justify Rosenstein's resignation or firing. It doesn't have to be just those two possibilities. It is a very real possibility that the content of the New York Times story is accurate, but that the timing of its leak to the New York Times was there in order to create a pretext for Donald Trump to fire Rod Rosenstein, something that we know he is increasingly eager to do. And I think that that is the most likely scenario. At this time, it has become abundantly clear that Trump's desire to get rid of Rosenstein as a sort of way to impede the Russia investigation has become a very high priority of Donald Trump's. And yet, it still seems realistic that the content of the story may be true. And now, indeed, Rosenstein is going. Depending on whether it is a resignation or a firing, it's not consequential in the sense that either way Rosenstein's gone. It is consequential in terms of whether Trump can appoint an interim person to fill in. I'm sorry, in terms, that's not right, strike that. It's important in terms of whether the Solicitor General automatically becomes the person supervising the Trump-Russia investigation, or whether there needs to be a Trump-appointed and Senate-confirmed replacement for Rod Rosenstein. So it is consequential, whether it's a firing or a resignation. It does appear that that New York Times story was a pretext deliberately put out there in order to justify Rosenstein's firing. And number three, the most important question is, will this succeed in order to impede the investigation? I'm guessing, Pat, that they are not at this point so audacious that they would have whoever replaces Rosenstein literally shut down the investigation. I think Mueller would go nuts. I think that there would be, hopefully, a rise in civil disobedience and protesting, although we'll talk about that later. The smarter way to do it is to just impede the progress of the investigation in other ways, rejecting requests for certain information, getting in the way of Trump ultimately sitting down with Mueller. That would be the smart way to impede the investigation.
Yeah, and this is pretty major, but maybe it doesn't come across as much of a bombshell as like the James Comey firing did, because there are so many layers here and we're not even certain about all the specifics. It seems like there was a lot of lead up to it. So I'm worried that it would cause progressives not to uprise and actually take to the streets in anger over what happened here, because it just kind of seems like a foregone conclusion. You know what I mean?
In other words, Trump fires FBI director specifically to impede the investigation. That has a different cachet. That Deputy AG chooses to resign, even if that's not actually what he did, simply is not going to have, and it's not going to rile people up in the same way.
Even though this is the easiest path to ending the Russia investigation, because his replacement could do that and the whole thing wraps up.
Next thing I want to talk about, because we are getting to it, and the Rod Rosenstein departure, whether it was a firing or a resignation, relates to that, is that it is time for people to get out in the streets, and that's what I want to talk about next. Today's program is sponsored in part by Purple Mattress. Did you spend the night tossing, turning? Is stress keeping you up, or maybe a stiff neck? If you're struggling to get a good night's sleep, you've got to try Purple Mattress, which is made with a brand new material that was developed by an actual rocket scientist. The Purple Mattress will feel different than anything you've experienced. Unlike traditional memory foam, the Purple material is both firm and soft, so it's supportive yet comfortable, and it's breathable, so it sleeps cool. And with their 100-night risk-free trial, if you're not fully satisfied, you can return your mattress for a full refund. Not to mention, it's backed by a 10-year warranty with free shipping and free returns. You're going to love Purple, and as of right now, our listeners and viewers will get a free Purple pillow with the purchase of a mattress, in addition to the great free gifts that they are offering site-wide. Just go to purple.com, use my promo code Pakman at checkout. That's purple.com, code Pakman. The only way to get the free pillow is to use my code Pakman at checkout. That's purple.com, code Pakman.